People think they know what a car wreck looks like. They picture the movies, slow motion, glass flying, actors screaming with perfect clarity, the hero rushing in to pull someone out just before the flames. But that's not real life. Real life is ugly, confusing, loud in some places, and eerily quiet in others. Real life is the stink of gasoline in your nose, your boots sticking to the pavement because of blood you don't want to look down at, and strangers standing around whispering because they're too scared to get close. That's what I stepped into that night. The SUV was crushed nose first into the guardrail, headlights still burning like blind eyes staring at nothing. The smaller sedan was sideways in the lane, the front end folded in on itself, glass glittering everywhere like spilled diamonds. The air was thick with smoke and steam, and underneath it all was the sound I'll never forget. The steady drip-drip of radiator fluid, mixing with blood on the asphalt. I moved fast. Because you have to. Hesitation gets people killed. My partner headed to the sedan. An older woman was still pinned, her chest heaving shallow and uneven. I went to the SUV. The driver was slumped against the wheel, groaning, blood matting his hair, but still responsive. The passenger, he was another story. He was young, early 20s maybe, face pale as paper, body twisted wrong against the seatbelt. His breathing was shallow, frantic, like every breath was the last scrap his body could grab. I slid in beside him, braced his head, and told him we had him, that we were going to get him out. Half the time you don't know if they hear you, but you say it anyway. His eyes opened for a second, glassy and unfocused, and he locked on me, and then he whispered something that made my stomach turn cold. Don't let me go back. That's not the kind of thing you expect a trauma victim to say. Usually it's, help me, or am I gonna die? But this sounded like a plea from somewhere else entirely, and before I could even process it, his eyes rolled back and he went limp. We didn't stop. Couldn't. We got him out, strapped, boarded, loaded. I kept pressure on his side, feeling the blood seep hot through the gauze, my partner calling out vitals, BP dropping, pulse erratic. Sirens up, lights on, and we tore down the road. Every bump felt like it might finish him off. My gloves were slick. The monitor was screaming at us, and all I could hear in my head was that damn whisper, don't let me go back. We blasted into the ER bay, doors flying open, staff waiting, nurses, residents, the attending. They swarmed like a machine that had done this 1,000 times. I rattled off the report while we pushed him through the sliding doors. Male, 20s, blunt chest trauma, unstable vitals, probable collapsed lung, 2 large-bore IVS established en route. They nodded, barely looking at me, already focused on him. That's when I should have stepped back. My part was done, but I didn't move. Something kept me rooted there at the edge of the trauma bay. Sweat running down my back, gloves still tacky with blood. I've been in a lot of ERs, dropped off more patients than I can count. But something about this one felt different the second we rolled him in. Most nights the ER is chaos. Bright lights, voices barking orders, machines beeping. But this night, beneath all that noise, there was something else. A silence that didn't belong. A heaviness like the room itself was waiting, watching. I can't explain it, but every instinct I had screamed that whatever was about to happen wasn't going to follow protocol, wasn't going to fit into the neat boxes medicine gives us. And I was right. The trauma bay swallowed him whole. That's what it feels like when you wheel a critical patient in. The doors hiss open, and suddenly the weight shifts from your shoulders to a dozen other people who know the drill. But that night, standing there at the edge of the room, I felt like I hadn't let him go at all, like I was still tethered to him somehow. The attending barked orders without hesitation. Airway first. What's his SAT? Get me a chest tube set. A nurse repeated the vitals I'd already given. Another cut away his clothes, scissors chewing through fabric while sticky pads were slapped onto his chest. Monitors came alive with jagged lines and shrill alarms. It should have been routine, as far as traumas go. Ugly, but routine. But the way the room felt, it wasn't routine. Most trauma bays are noisy, chaotic, alive with motion. This one was tense, heavy. Every voice seemed sharper, every movement a little too fast, like even the team felt something wasn't lining up. I watched as they tried to stabilize him. Oxygen mask on, IVS wide open, needle into the chest. Sure enough, a hiss of trapped air escaped. Classic tension, pneumothorax. It should have brought him relief, but his oxygen numbers barely climbed. His chest kept heaving like he was drowning on dry land. The resident looked at the monitor, then at the attending, confusion clear in his face. "Sats aren't improving, doctor." The attending didn't waste time. Chest tube. Now they cut into his side, slid the tube in, more air and blood spilling out. Still, the numbers wouldn't hold. His skin was waxy, lips edging blue. I saw the nurse push epinephrine, another hang a bag of fluids, but it was like everything they threw at him just bounced off. And then something happened that didn't fit the script. He opened his eyes, wide, clearer than they'd been back in the SUV. And he looked right at me, past all the people leaning over him, past the masks and gowns and bright surgical light. His lips moved, and I swear to God I heard it, even over the chaos. "I told you, don't let me go back." My blood ran cold. Nobody else reacted. They were too busy working, but I froze. His voice wasn't weak this time. It was steady, low, and it carried like it was meant only for me. And then, just as suddenly, his body seized. His back arched against the gurney, alarms spiking, and then he went limp. Flatline. "Code Blue!" someone shouted. The room erupted. CPR started, compressions pounding his chest in that merciless rhythm. Drugs pushed, shocks delivered, everyone locked into the protocol. But I wasn't looking at the monitor or at the doctors. I was looking at his face for a split second. While his body was technically gone, his eyes stayed open, and they weren't staring at the ceiling. They were staring right at me. I stepped back, chest tight, telling myself I was imagining it. Adrenaline does strange things to your mind. But then one of the nurses said under her breath, "Why won't his pupils blow?" I knew what she meant. Pupils usually dilate wide when there's no brain activity, but his didn't. They stayed fixed, locked forward, like he was still in there somehow. The team worked him for 20 minutes. Compressions, meds, more shocks. Finally, the attending called it. Time of death given. Equipment pulled back. Hands falling away. The room went still in that way it always does. The energy sucked out, leaving only the harsh smell of sweat, blood, and antiseptic. But I couldn't move. His eyes had finally closed when they stopped, but the weight of them lingered like they were still on me. I peeled off my gloves, hands shaking harder than I wanted to admit. I'd seen plenty of people die. It's part of the job, but none of them ever spoke like that. None of them ever seemed to know something I didn't. I should have walked out, gone to finish my paperwork, reset the rig, and waited for the next call. That's what you do. You compartmentalize. But when I turned toward the door, something stopped me cold. The monitor beside him, the one that should have been flatline, flickered. Just for a second, a jagged spike, one sharp beat, and then it was gone. The attending noticed too. He frowned, tapped the monitor, muttered something about artifact. Everyone shrugged it off. Machines glitch all the time, but I knew what I saw, and deep down I knew it wasn't the machine. I walked out into the hall, the weight in my chest heavier than the kit I'd carried into the scene. Most nights I can leave it behind. That night, I carried it with me. Still do. When a code ends, the room doesn't go silent the way people think it does. It's not like TV where everyone stands around frozen in dramatic pause. What really happens is exhaustion sets in. People peel off gloves, toss bloody gauze into bins, adjust their masks with tired hands. The energy doesn't vanish. It just drops like a stone, heavy and low. That's how it felt when the attending called it. Nurses muttered to one another as they stripped off gowns. A resident sighed like he'd just run a marathon. Someone scribbled the time of death on the chart, their pens scratching loud in the quiet. It was all routine, because it had to be. You can't dwell too long in this line of work. But I couldn't shake it. That one spike on the monitor, that whisper back in the SUV, his eyes staying fixed during compressions. My head told me it was all explainable. Adrenaline, electrical misfire, my own mind playing tricks under stress. But my gut didn't buy it. My gut knew this wasn't like any other case. I lingered longer than I should have, standing in the hallway outside the bay, staring through the glass as they covered his body. The driver from the SUV had been wheeled into another room, still groaning, still alive. The older woman from the sedan was in surgery, last I'd heard. But this one, the young man, I felt tied to him in a way I didn't want to admit. Like he'd left a handprint on me that wouldn't wash off. One of the nurses came out, catching sight of me, still standing there. She gave me this look, half pity, half annoyance. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, lied, said I was fine. She didn't press, just shrugged and moved on. Because in the ER, you don't stop to check in for real. You just keep going. I went to the break room, sat down hard on one of those stiff plastic chairs, and tried to get my breathing under control. My partner walked in a few minutes later, fresh from turning in the paperwork. He cracked a joke about bad coffee, like we always did, but when he saw my face, he shut up. "You're still thinking about him, aren't you?" "Yeah," I admitted. My voice came out low, almost ashamed. Something about him. I don't know. Doesn't sit right. He didn't ask what I meant. Maybe he didn't want to. Instead, he just patted my shoulder and said, "You've been doing this too long, man." They start to stick if you let them. Don't let them. Then he left and I was alone again with my thoughts. That should have been the end of it. Another patient lost. Another bad night in a long career full of them. But it wasn't. Because about an hour later, I walked past the trauma bay again, and the room was empty. Bed stripped. Monitors dark. The body gone. That wasn't strange. They'd moved him to the morgue. What was strange was the feeling that hit me when I stopped at the doorway. You know that sensation of walking into a room and realizing someone was just there? The air still feels occupied, like it remembers them. That's how it felt. I couldn't shake the thought that if I looked hard enough, I'd see him still lying there. And worse, I felt like if I turned my back too long, he'd be standing up. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Stress, fatigue, caffeine crash. But the weight in my chest didn't lift. I carried it out with me when my shift finally ended, the early gray of dawn creeping in as I drove home. The streets were quiet, the kind of empty that should have felt peaceful. But even then, in my own car, with the sirens behind me, I could still hear his voice. "Don't let me go back." That's the kind of thing that eats at you. Because what did he mean? Back to the wreck? Back to pain? Or something else entirely? I kept running scenarios through my head, searching for a logical anchor. But every time I thought I found one, it slipped away. And the story didn't end there, because a few days later, I came back for another shift, and one of the night nurses stopped me in the hallway. She said, almost offhand, "You remember that young guy from the SUV?" My stomach dropped. Of course I remembered. They said when they brought him down to the morgue, the body bag was unzipped. Wide open. No one admitted to doing it. Just open. She shrugged it off, probably didn't think twice. But me, I felt that cold shiver crawl up my spine, the kind that makes your heart hammer for no good reason. I didn't know what to say, so I just walked away. But inside, I was screaming with questions I didn't want answered. The morgue story should have been the end of it. A weird slip, an open zipper, one of those little mistakes in the chain of endless human hands that touch a body after death. Happens all the time. At least, that's what I told myself. But I noticed, after that night, people in the ER stopped talking about him out loud. That's unusual. Usually, a tough case gets rehashed a dozen times. Staff trade notes. Residents replay decisions. Nurses shake their heads. But with him, it was silence. Like everyone agreed without saying it that they didn't want his name in their mouths. Then about a week later, something happened that still twists my stomach. I'd brought in a patient from a cardiac arrest. Nothing related, just another bad night. We wheeled him into the same trauma bay where the young man had died. I was standing off to the side watching the team work when I felt it. Like static in the air, a heaviness pressing down. I looked up and I swear for half a second I saw him. Not lying on the bed, but standing at the far corner of the room, half in the shadows. Pale face, hollow eyes, just watching. I blinked and he was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, just a trick of the light after a 14-hour shift. But then the nurse at the foot of the bed muttered, almost under her breath, "Not this room again." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to. From then on, I avoided that trauma bay when I could. And when I couldn't, I kept my back to the wall, eyes on the living. Because the truth is, I started to dread the dead more than the dying. That's not something a paramedic admits easily. Our job is supposed to be about protocol, science, saving who can be saved. But there are nights when the line blurs, when you realize medicine doesn't have the language for everything you see. I carried him with me into every call after that. I'd be working another scene, blood on my gloves, adrenaline pounding, and in the quiet moments in the back of the rig, I'd hear his words again. Don't let me go back. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a warning, something meant to stick in me like a splinter. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe his brain was firing random signals. Maybe I hallucinated in the ER under stress. Maybe the monitor glitch, the morgue zipper, the shadows in the trauma bay. All of it has simple explanations if you break it down enough. But deep down, I know that's not what I felt. I've seen a lot of people die. I've watched life leave the body more times than I care to count. And this one was different. What unsettles me most is not the way he died, but the way he seemed to know it was coming. Like he was already halfway gone before we ever pulled him from the wreck. Like he had seen where he was headed, and was begging me not to let him be dragged back into it. And maybe that's the part that scars me most. Not the blood, not the flat line, not even the look in his eyes. It's the question that will never leave me. Back where? Because whatever answer he knew, I never will. And I can't shake the feeling that on that night, for just a few minutes, I brushed against something none of us are supposed to touch. Years have passed since that night, and I've seen plenty more carnage. Wrecks, stabbings, overdoses, people broken in ways that test everything you've got. Most of them fade with time. You remember faces here and there, fragments of words, maybe a family member screaming in a waiting room. But this one, it never faded. Every now and then, when I'm back in an ER trauma bay, I catch myself scanning the corners. I'll hear a monitor beep the wrong way and feel that same cold grip in my chest. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, when it's quiet, His words replay in my head like they've been burned onto the inside of my skull. Don't let me go back. I still don't know what he meant. Maybe he was delirious, oxygen-starved, his brain firing off scraps of memory. Maybe it was just a dying man's last nonsense. That's what I tell myself on good days. But on the bad ones, when sleep won't come and the shadows in my room feel heavier than they should, I wonder if he knew something I didn't. If he saw something past that line we're all headed toward, something so terrible he begged not to be sent there again. Medicine is supposed to give you answers. Numbers, charts, protocols. But sometimes the answers stop, and you're left standing in a room with a silence you can't explain. That's the part they don't tell you when you sign up for this job. That there are wounds that never clot. Scars you carry long after the blood has been cleaned and the paperwork filed. I don't tell this story often. Most of my colleagues wouldn't want to hear it, and the public prefers the movie version anyway, the one with heroes and clean endings. But this isn't that. This is the version that sticks to your ribs, the version that keeps you up nights staring at the ceiling. Because the truth is, I still see his face. I still hear his voice. And no matter how many calls I run, no matter how many patients I hand off, this one always waits for me in the quiet. The case will always be the scar I can't scrub away, the one that reminds me there are places medicine can't follow, and questions no training can answer. And it will always leave me wondering what waits on the other side, and why he was so desperate not to return,